So we had a long discussion on persons. So today we will have the concluding discussion on this topic. We have completed almost everything, but there are certain theories with respect to corporate personality which are left, and you are asked questions in the tests here and there, so you should know about them. Otherwise, will you not see the problem with corporate personality even without these theories? Well, that's not the case. You can clearly see that. I mean, if you're thinking critically about the problems that we have discussed, some of the problems that we have discussed, like giving too much importance to corporate personality to the extent that we treat them same as humans. That's when the problems arise. And obviously the other questions are also there with respect to when the veil of corporate personality is to be lifted, pierced. So some of those questions, some of those answers are also found in these theories of corporate personality that we are going to discuss. So theories of corporate personality, what do they basically tell us about? Well, they tell us about justifications and reasons for this corporate personality. That is, why does corporate personality exist? Why should they exist? Or the degree, the extent to which they should exist. Okay, all those questions are answered in different ways by these different theories of corporate personality, and as you will see, they are they are influenced by different ideas of different times. And obviously our understanding of corporation and corporate personality has undergone a lot of change over time, and you can see that clearly through these different corporate theories of corporate personality as you critically think about them. So yes, now before we go into discussing about the specific different theories, one more thing that I would like to refer to, as I remember we had started with, that when it comes to legal persons, what is the limit? Okay, what is the limit of recognition of legal personality? And why should we recognize legal personality? Why not restrict legal persons to only natural persons? That humans are natural persons, and if you'd like to extend it to other natural beings, fine. But why should we not call only humans, for example, for convenience's sake here, as legal persons by virtue of their naturality, natural existence as humans? Well, there are many different reasons. We, while discussing about corporate personality, we discussed about efficiency, expediency. So many factors could be there, for which the law recognizes non-human, entities, inanimate entities, as also having legal personality. Now, is there a limit to which law can recognize non-human entities as legal, persons? Well, if you go purely by, that legal argument, there seems to be none. Whenever, something that might have been, thought, might have been assumed to be unthinkable 100 years ago, are in fact happening. When you see recognition of legal personality of rivers or trees, etc. However, even in earlier times there were unthinkable things. Okay, if you think about the matter from a rational perspective, but those entities have nonetheless been recognized as having legal personality. So idols, etc. So what is it that makes the law recognize some of these non-human entities as legal persons, and some other as not having such legal personality? Well, you could have many different answers. Okay, two broad approaches as identified by John Dewey in one of his articles, I'll share the link with you, are basically of this Greek teleological approach. Okay, that everything has a essence, certain nature in them. Okay, and it is that nature, it is that essence which is recognized. So, but that's that seems quite nonsensical. Okay, so if there is something called essence or nature of things, by virtue of which their legal personality is recognized. So why is it that we make mistakes about them sometimes, and we do not in other times? But it is not that easy to give that idea up either. But then a better explanation for the same would be the consequentialist philosophies, okay, that we have discussed. It is the effect of recognizing something as legal personality that matters. Okay, there are certain advantages, there are certain benefits of recognizing something as having legal personality. So it is not really the essence that we are concerned about, it is the benefits. Now the problem with that is that why not apply the same to even natural humans? Why not think about natural humans in terms of and their personality in terms of the consequences that ensue? And that's the problem that we have already struggled. But this seems to be the approach which, to me, if you ask, makes more sense. Okay, so at least when it is applied to the case of corporate personality. But you may then ask, why restrict to corporate personality? But yes, I will have difficulties explaining, justifying why the same should not be applied to natural humans. Okay, but that's a separate question. And we have already dealt with that to a great detail when we discussed about, for example, natural personality of animals. Now let's address this question, that is of legal persons, corporate personality. So in that, you will see that there are many consequentialist arguments, basically different, implications of recognizing some non-human entity as having legal personality. There are certain advantages to doing that. And there are different ways how the same is recognized. Okay. So it is with respect to these questions that we are going to look at the different theories of corporate personality. So the first one that we may start with is fiction theory of corporate personality. There are many proponents of this theory, started with Pope Innocent IV. However, there are other major known, proponents of this theory. And those are Koch, Blackstone, Savigny, Salmond, Holland. These are some of the proponents, adherents of this particular theory of corporate personality. What do they believe in then? So their idea is that, well, corporate personality is not real personality. They are merely creation of fiction of law. Okay, so it is by virtue of fiction of law, personality is attributed to entities that, do not have any such personality. So basically saying that non-human entities, humans have personality and others do not, but law by virtue of fiction attributing personality to these entities. Okay, so that's their essence. So it's a very important a thing being said here, that they do not have personality of their own. It is for the sake of something. They're not focusing on that something, but they're merely saying that, well, it's by virtue of this fiction of law that personality of the corporation is recognized. So it's a fiction, it's not real. Corporate personality is not real personality, it's fiction. So Savigny says, the essential quality of all corporations consists in this, that the subject of the right does not exist in individual members thereof, not even in all the members taken collectively, but in the ideal whole. So remember, once incorporation happens, as Salmon versus Salmon, Limited tells us, there is separate corporate personality. Okay, that is being, now this separate corporate personality, okay, once the incorporation happens, okay, the separate corporate personality is a different legal entity. It's a separate legal entity, okay, but it does not really exist. Where do you see it? It's not intangible in the sense that, well, intangible, things might still be considered as, extant. So you could say it's an idea, okay, it's not a thing in any sense of the term, okay, it's an idea. And that idea is a creation of our imagination, okay, creation of fiction. So legal fiction creates that, okay, something that does not exist. So that's what is being referred to. The essential quality of all corporations consists in this, that the subject of the right does not exist in the individual members thereof. So those who create the corporation are separate, and the corporation itself is separate. So not even in all the members taken collectively. The members are different. The totality is not the corporation. The corporation is separate from the members. So that's why he says that in the ideal whole, so it's an idea, okay, it's not the reality, it's an ideal whole. A particular but spatially important result thereof is that by the change of an individual member, indeed even of all the members, the essence of the unity of the corporation is not affected. So as we discussed earlier, when we were discussing about the advantages and disadvantages of incorporation, that members may come and go, but the corporate personality, continues. Okay, so that's what is being referred to here. So there is an ideal whole, and that ideal whole is separate from the members taken collectively. So it's not the collectivity of members that is being referred to as corporation, but it's some idea, okay, separate from them. And that's what creates the separate legal entity. And the result thereof is that even if there is change in the membership of individuals, so members may come and go, that does not change the essence, the unity of a corporation. Okay, so the corporation remains. The alteration of members does not change the corporation itself. So that's what Savigny says, and you can clearly see, what fiction theory is really talking about. They recognize separate personality. But that's why does it exist? By virtue of fiction of law. Gray says, John Chipman Gray says, by fiction, an abstract entity called the corporation is created, and by a second fiction, the wills of individuals are attributed to it. Hence, the rights and duties of such person only extends to what attributes to it and no further. Now, you have to understand this, carefully. Says that by virtue of fiction, an abstract entity, that is the corporation, is created. And there is a second fiction that attributes wills of individuals to the corporation. But remember, it's not the dynamic will of these individuals. So individual wills might vary of these members who have created. They might change. But because the corporation is a separate entity now, it has a separate will. Okay. But it is not capable of having that will. So there is, by virtue of this second fiction, there's an attribution of will of all these individuals, okay, which is separate from their individual wills, that is attributed to this corporate entity. And hence the rights and duties of such persons extend only to what attributes to it and no further. So here the rights are not, we are not talking about rights of the individuals who have created it, but only of this entity that we have created, okay. And their rights and duties extend to the extent that they're members of this corporation, okay. So they're not individually, it's not the individual rights and duties of these members that we are concerned about, okay. It extends only to the rights and duties of this collective entity that we have created. So that's why some of the problems. So, for example, when the Bank National Action case, we discussed the other day, was talking about where the judges said that, well, through the protection of rights and duties of this corporation, we are protecting the rights of, shareholders or other members of the company. Well, that's where the problem is. That entity is separate, okay? And we are not concerned about the individual rights of these individuals. That's there. There is always the protection of that, okay? But when, for example, companies' affairs are affected, it is always going to, in one way or the other, affect others. Then how do we say that, well, by virtue of affecting the rights of the corporation, we are also affecting the fundamental rights of the individuals? The interference there has to be direct. Well, if you go by fiction theory, well, that becomes problematic because these two are separate. By fiction, the corporate itself has a separate existence, okay? Well, many things affect our fundamental rights, okay? There are many things that could affect our fundamental rights. And if at all that is to be protected, it is to be protected directly for those individuals. And they will take the claim to the court saying that, well, our fundamental rights are being affected, okay? And to the extent that they're affected, the same will definitely be protected as the law allows, okay? But that would be the case of fundamental rights of those individuals, okay? When we talk about the rights of the corporation, that's a separate matter because they have separate corporate existence, as the fiction theory tells us. So that's one of the implications of fiction theory of corporate personality. So yes, so that's the first theory of corporate personality. So I hope this is clear to you. So is the first theory clear? The fiction theory of corporate personality?
Yes, sir.
So yes, that's basically the idea. Okay. So the next important theory that we have is this goes quite parallel to and alongside the first theory, that is fiction theory. Okay. So this other theory is the concession theory. And the proponents of this theory broadly overlap with the proponents of fiction theory as well. So you have Savigny, Salmon, Dicey. They all subscribe to this particular theory. So they believe that yes, corporation is creation of a fiction. It's an outcome of a fiction. But how does that fiction come into being? Well, that has to be created by the law. Okay, and where does that come from? Well, it comes from the state. Well, so concession theory says that, well, this personality, this fictive personality of corporations exists by virtue of a concession granted by the state. If it were not granted by the state, the fiction wouldn't be possible and the entity wouldn't exist. So see, the more or less, broadly overlap. The only addition here, which is important and is also a kind of positivistic approach, as you see, is this: that, well, the existence of the personality here, the corporate personality here, depends on the discretion of the state. So the basic assumption here is that the sovereign, okay, and the human beings are the only realities. The rest are creation of this concessions. So we know that it is a case of fiction, but not every fiction would be recognized. So which one will have corporate personality? The ones which are recognized by the state, the ones which is which is accepted by the state. Okay, so that's the underlying assumption here. So there might be other intermediate groups, okay, but they cannot claim recognition as a person. Now only those can make that claim of being a person, okay, corporate person here we are concerned about. The ones, okay, only the ones to which concession has been granted by the sovereign or the state. So that's the idea. It goes parallel to the previous, in philosophy, overlaps to the extent that both it's being accepted that it's an outcome of fiction. It's not a reality. Okay, it's a fiction. And in the second theory, the addition is that how does that fiction become possible? It becomes possible because it is considered by the state or the sovereign. It's a concession granted by the state or the sovereign. So in order for their existence, for the existence of these corporations and their concession and their continuance, such person has to comply with the legal requirements as laid down by the state. So that means, well, there are certain conditions that are required to be fulfilled. So once they become, they are recognized as corporate persons, that's not the end of the discussion. There is no guarantee that it will continue. Okay, there are certain requirements that are to be fulfilled, and if they do not, then they are no longer corporate persons. So that's the idea, that it's the concession given by the state, and those requirements, for this concession have to be fulfilled. And that's why it says that for their existence and continuous, such persons, the corporate persons here, they have to comply with the legal requirements as laid down by the state. So their coming into existence happens by virtue of a statute. And the statute might lay down the requirements, that they have to fulfill. So, for example, certain number of members, if it is a private, corporation or public corporation, company, whatever the requirements have to be fulfilled. And if those are not fulfilled, then they are not corporation. So it goes quite well with the fiction theory, but it is different from that, okay? Only to the extent that it attributes certain discretionary power to the state in the matter of recognizing corporations. So someone who is a proponent of fiction theory could as much be proponent of the other, okay, to the extent that they say that the same is subject to the discretion of the state. Well, there are others who do not subscribe to that idea. They say that, well, states do not have that, states do not have that authority, that power to not recognize, as if the corporations actually exist. Okay. So what are those then? What could that theory be? As you would have rightly guessed, okay, one says it's fiction, the other would say that, well, it's very much real. Okay, so it's a real thing, that corporations are not, creation of fictions, but that they are real entities. So they are organic beings. Okay, they are organic beings. Okay, they are as much real as humans are real. That's kind of problematic. Well, we say that there is separate corporate personality and members are not the same thing as the separate legal entity that the corporation is. Then how is it? And then how can we say that, well, that thing is real, that, which clearly does not exist outside of that imagination? How is that possible? Well, this theory says that it is possible. And why do they say so? Let's look at that. So that theory is the realistic theory, the one that believes that corporations actually exist in reality. Okay, they have separate existence. And it broadly overlaps with this other idea of, called organic theory, but not totally, the same, as you will see. So what is this theory? It's called realistic theory, and it was propounded by a German jurist by the name Johannes Althusius, Johannes Althusius, and also further developed by Otto von Guericke. So these are the two proponents of this particular theory. And their primary belief is that the corporation is a real person, okay, as real as humans are, okay. It's just that, okay, the reality is not material reality, but a psychic reality. Now you know why, this comes from German philosophers. They are idealistic, okay? They're romantic in their approaches. So here's also there is an effect of that particular way of looking at things in the world, that there is not merely a physical existence, there could also be a metaphysical existence. Okay, just the way Plato talks about real objects, okay, solid objects, okay, one that exists in this reality, and there could be perfectly solid object in the world of ideas. Okay, so something like that, as you see here. Okay, so they're saying that, well, it's as much real, but it's not just materially real, but it's a psychic reality. So that's their difference. And the reason, as I was trying to understand, would be the romantic approach that is taken by most of these German philosophers. So this theory believes that the corporation is a representation of psychical realities which the law recognizes rather than creates. So a very important remark here, and two things have to be focused on here. Yes? So corporation is a representation of psychic realities. Okay, so the totality here, there is a separate psychic existence of that totality. Now you probably need to have some lesson on psychology, etc., to be able to understand that. I do not have that much expertise to explain that to you in detail, but this is what they're saying. Yes, the totality, okay, the corporation, okay, because it's the totality, okay, is a representation of a psychic reality. So it has a kind of existence of its own, not in the material world, but in the psychical world, okay. And secondly, that reality is not created by the law, as concession theorists would say, okay. That is not created by the law. Law merely recognizes that which already exists. So there is a urgency on the part of the law to recognize this, okay, because it's a reality. And how do you deny this reality? First, saying that, well, corporate personality is very real, it's important, and law might as well recognize it because it's required, okay. As opposed to this, the concession theory leaves it up to the state to recognize it, okay. So this is the difference that you see. So this particular theory means that the group personality has the same features as human personality, okay. So the groups have a real mind, a real will, and a real power of action. So this is where the other theory, that is organic theory, overlaps here. So what is an organic theory? So organic theory, as you will see, so think about humans, okay? We have different organs here. You have lungs, you have your heart, and you have so many different organs, and they all each play their own specific, role, okay? And then the totality is me. So this totality is an abstraction, okay? Abstraction is in what? Well, I exist in the reality, but the totality is the sum total of all the individual parts. And this totality is greater than sum total of those individual parts, okay? Because the totality means something more than merely my skin, my lungs, my nose, my eyes, etc., etc., okay? The totality is a different, thing. You cannot just say that, well, I am merely all the organs put together. Well, when you put them together in a certain form, this is something greater than the individuals. The whole is greater than the component parts, okay? So whole has a different existence than merely those component parts. So that's how, that's what, organisms are, okay? And think about it. You can also take it down to even specific, cells in your body, okay? Who am I, you may ask, okay? Who am I? It's the me, what appears to the, outside world. That's the totality of me. But then you see there are billions of cells in your body, each playing its part, okay? Some of them die, some of them, are born, and some die, but you continue through, that dynamic process. So you have an existence, organic existence, even when there are changes, within your body. So that's something you can, refer to in the physical world. The same can be talked about in from this particular approach, okay? So they are saying that, well, think about this corporation as an organism, okay? Individuals are, its parts, okay? That's why it has been said. It means that the group personality has the same features as a human personality. So the group personality, that is the corporation, actually exists. So think about an ant colony, okay? There is this, thing going on now that says that, well, ant colonies, okay, even though you look at one individual ants and they seem to be so insignificant, but they're very significant when you look at them in totality. Okay? It seems that they have a collective consciousness. Well, I'm not telling you pseudoscience here, okay? So you do not have to believe me, nor do I believe in what I'm saying. I'm just telling you that there is this idea, okay? So I'm not putting wrong information in your head. It's an example to tell you what is being talked about here. So the idea here is this, that, well, an organic being could exist, okay, that consists of individual members, but it's greater than those individual members, okay. That is what is being said. So there could be a group personality, okay, and it has the same features of human personality, but it's not the same as those individual humans. So for example, just the way I'm not the same thing as all the billions of cells in my body, okay. In a similar way, they're saying that, well, this group reality is also as much a reality in the psychical world, and they exist, okay. So you see there's a broad overlap between this realistic and organic theory here. And they say that the groups have a real mind and a real will and a real power of action. So yes, they're not saying that it's the sum total of all the individuals. No, there is some entity that's bigger than those individuals. So these groups have a real mind, a real will, a real power. Now, I think another example might explain to you. So you know that when individuals have to decide on things, they have a different way of making choices about what to do. But whenever you put many individuals together, their way of decision making is different, okay. It's not just the totality of individual, members there, okay. Their own individual choices might vary in the context of that, larger whole. So that means there is a whole is different from the totality of the individuals, okay. So that's being said here. So the groups have a real mind, a real will, a real power of action. So that's the case of corporation as well. Well, in real life, what could that be? Well, it seems profit making is the is the idea there when it comes to corporations. Basically, companies I'm referring to. Okay, not all corporations. Well, fine, but what about corporate soul? It makes sense when we talk about corporate, aggregate. What about corporate soul? So, is the corporate soul the organic reality of the corporate, the individual who's representing the corporate soul? Well, that's where the problem is. Are we saying this the same thing? Well, when we discussed about different capacity and double personality, we said that, well, one individual only works in a particular capacity. The existence of the corporate body is separate from the individual. Well, how would realistic theory, or organic theory for that matter, address that problem? Well, that's where the shortcoming of this theory is. And there are many other problems that I already tried to explain. It's the kind of romanticization of things, okay? And even if there is such an, existence, okay, of a psychic reality, why should we bother when it affects our individual, individual rights and liberties, okay? Why should we, prioritize that psychic existence over that of our own individual existence? And that what affects us at the individual level, something that we are very certain about and not at the other level. So these are certain things that we need to address, okay? And I think that this particular theory is not able to address that. So, so that's what this particular theory is, okay? So I hope that is clear to you. This realistic theory is clear to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we discussed three theory, okay, fiction theory, then you have concession theory, then you have a realistic theory, okay. The next important theory is, and obviously when we talk about realistic theory, it overlaps with the organic theory, okay. And then the fourth, or you may call it fifth, theory is the symbolist or bracket theory of corporate personality. What is that? So the bracket theory was propounded by Hans Kelsen and Rudolf Eyring. Okay, so these are the two major proponents of this theory, bracket theory. And what do they say? What do they believe in? Well, they say that juristic personality is a symbol. Okay, it's merely symbolic. Okay, is a symbol to facilitate the working of the corporation. Because if the symbol didn't exist, then there will be difficulties in how the corporation functions. So it's a symbolic representation that facilitates the working of the corporation. So we are concerned about kind of efficiency and expediency, okay, here in this particular theory. So the implication of that would be that only the members of the corporations are persons in true sense, and around them a bracket is put to indicate that they are to be treated as one unit, when they have formed themselves into a corporation. So you see the difference of this particular theory from the previous theory that we have discussed. They said that, well, there is a separate existence which is greater than the individuals. Well, this theory, the bracket theory, says that, well, why, romanticize, okay? Corporations, nothing but an aggregation of individuals. And for the sake of identifying the corporation, we put a bracket around them. So that's what they say. So that's why they say that only the members of the corporations are persons, okay? But then it's not their individual personality that is being, referred to, okay? They're saying that it's the members of the corporation, okay, who are persons in the true sense, okay? They are the persons in the true sense. And round them a bracket is put to indicate that they are to be treated as one unit. So it's not their individuality that we are concerned about, it's the collectivity. We are to treat them as one unit. Why? To facilitate working of the corporation. Otherwise, if you remember, I told you that 4 or 5 persons entering into legal relation with 4 or 5 others, you can still deal with this. But 1,000 people dealing with 1,000 others, the legal obligations here will be unmanageable. So to avoid that, we need to identify them as one unit, even though in reality it's them, the individual members, okay? So, however, we are not referring to them as individual members, okay? Because then the problem persists. So we merely, for the sake of this convenience, for the sake of facilitating the work of the corporation, we put a bracket around these people so that we can, deal with this legal, obligations that, the relations that arise between these two different sets of people. So that's what this particular theory says. So they say that it's the members of the corporation who are the bearers of rights and bound by duties, for the convenience of referring to as the corporation, okay? So we treat them as one unit, but in reality the rights actually belong in them, okay? They are the bearers of rights and they are the bearers of the duties. But because it is difficult for us to talk in terms of each one of them having rights and duties, we treat them as, so for the sake of convenience, we refer to them as a corporation. So that's what they're saying. So here they're saying that, well, it's easier for us to, whenever we have a problem, well, lift the corporate, wheel of corporate personality, and then you'll see who all are there, okay? So if convenience is the reason, then whenever it becomes convenient for us to, whenever it is necessary for us, why not raise the bracket and then see the true nature? So that's what bracket theory is all about, okay? Now the next theory, a simpler theory, is not that really, it's interesting, but not to the same extent as the others are. So the next would be institutional theory, okay? Institutional theory, and this was developed by Horion, H-A-U-R-I-O-N. And what does this theory say? So this theory says that individual is integrated into the institution and becomes part of it. So it considers the corporation as an institution. So individual becomes part of it, okay? So yeah, so it seems to be the case that this theory applies to the cases when institutions are, referred to as corporate persons. So that's what this theory is. And individuals become integrated into the institution to which we, attribute personality. So yeah, that's it. The next important theory is the purpose theory of corporate personality. Okay, And who are the proponents? The major proponents are Bringe, Becker, and Demilius. So these are the three proponents. Okay, the names are a little difficult to remember, so I'll just type it here for your convenience. So these are the three, okay, Bringe, Becker, and Demilius. Okay, they are the proponents of this particular theory. So I'm sharing all this, not very important, but because you are asked questions in tests and all that. Okay, but if you remember the underlying idea, the assumptions, that is good enough for me. So what do they say? Well, they believe in, what many of the other thinkers, other approaches also believe. And what is that? That only human beings have personality, okay, in the true sense, okay? Only human beings have personality in the true sense. And juristic persons are not persons at all. They're not real persons. They're not persons in any other sense at all, okay? So what are they then? They say that, well, these are subjectless properties. And the properties exist for certain purpose. Okay, so think about why trusts are equated with what trusts are equated as persons. Trusts are basically created with respect to certain property, isn't it? How the property is to be dealt with, how the property is to be managed, and for what purpose, for the benefit of whom. Okay, so these are properties that we are talking about. Okay, so think about like that here also. As this theory is talking about, they're saying that, well, only personality, case of personality would be of humans, okay, but there is juristic person, but they are not real person, okay, they're not persons, okay. What are they? They are merely subjectless properties, okay. There is no one in whom the property belongs to, individually, but this property exists for a certain purpose, okay. So think about it. A corporation comes into existence, okay, and whatever the property of the corporation is to be used for certain purposes, okay. So that is what is being recognized here. So that purpose is to be fulfilled. If it is used for some other purpose, then there is problem. The law has to intervene. So the idea is that the reason is for the law to protect certain purposes and interest of the individual human beings. The purpose is, again, as you know, the purpose does not exist in vacuo. Okay, it exists to serve certain human purpose. Okay, so that's what is being referred to. The reason here, okay, why is that? Why does this subjectless properties? Okay, why their personality is recognized in this sense? Because they serve certain purposes, okay, and the reason is for the law to protect certain purposes, okay, of whom? Of humans, okay, of individual human beings. That's what it exists for. So when I invest in a company, I have an interest, and that's why I have made the investment. So the company has to fulfill that purpose, okay. So that is the approach which has been taken up here. So the property here is supposed to be owned by the juristic person, okay. It does not belong to anyone, but it does belong for a purpose, okay. So we use the word juristic person, okay. So the property belongs in a juristic person. For the sake of our use in our language, we use it like that, okay. Who does this property belong to? Does it belong to me? No, it belongs to a purpose, okay, to be used for certain things, okay. And obviously there are benefits which are then obviously reverted back to the humans, okay, for whose sake the purpose exists, okay. That's there, that's given. But we are concerned about existence of the property and the purpose for which it exists. And therefore all legal juristic or artificial persons are legal devices merely, okay. They are merely legal devices for protecting and giving effect to some real purpose, okay. So that is the approach. So these corporate persons exist for a certain purpose. They have to fulfill that purpose. Those purposes are basically interests of individual humans, and the property is to serve that purpose, okay. So that's the effect of that. It must not deviate from that. If it does, then it negates the justification for its existence. So that's the other approach. So this, I suppose, would suffice for you. Okay, these are some of the major theories of corporate personality. Now you can definitely relate them with all the other discussions that we had, as I was also alluding to now and then here in this discussion. So if you find any difficulties, feel free to write to me, or drop questions here in the classroom. Otherwise, that's it with respect to this topic of law of persons. Well, I could have also dealt with these questions of legal personality of reviewers, but I think you can deal with them through your own research. Okay, if you have understood what we have discussed so far, you can understand why legal personality is also bestowed upon reviewers and other nature entities these days. So that's it for this topic.